Hi, Jona.
Hey, Marji, good to see you.
You too. How is it out there, the weather?
Well, it was really, really cold here in Colorado. We only had, in Florida, we only had 68 degrees the last 2 days.
Wow.
And it's funny to say this because you know
Yes,
this, we just moved here from Colorado and we're
I
used to like
know.
-10 at this time of the year. So it's like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
and
complaining about the weather.
at all. And I think we had lows of like 30. It was like, it's been like really crazy. We had like about 10 days ago, it started being like early, like 68 to 72. So everyone's out in tank tops and outside and happy. And then yesterday, downpour, and hail. It was pretty awesome though.
Yeah, the weather
Thank you.
patterns are crazy
Go
everywhere.
ahead.
No.
They really are. Thank you for taking the time to be here today, Jona. Yeah. So today, Jona, what are we chatting about? The difference between empaths and energetically sensitives?
Yes, and also how that plays into some of our relationships and how perhaps when we learn about this distinction, how this can actually help us to understand other people better. I think that's how we can call this episode, how to understand other people better.
Yeah. Which also helps us to understand ourselves, right? In our interaction with them. Yeah.
Exactly. As we know, this always goes hand in hand. So our outer relationships are mirrors or reflections of our inner relationship. But sometimes, it's not that, my outer relationships are messed up. Does that mean I'm messed up? No, that doesn't necessarily mean it. So there are mechanics and dynamics at place that we are sometimes not able to see, and that has to do with our conditioning. So the way we see the world and the way we see others and the way we see ourselves in it, those are these three different major sort of phases of developing consciousness. Okay, and so when we begin to observe what we can just find sort of as what we have as circumstances and learn how to read that, then it allows us to relate to it in a different way, and that can then show us perhaps where we have these blind spots. So if we read other people and then we relate this to ourselves, and then it can show us, sort of basically through finding out the differences, right? I mean, every conversation, Margie, you and I have conversations and we talk about things, how we see the world, how we see people, how we see energies, and your way is different than my way, right? And every time you and I talk, I learn something from you, you learn something from me. And as you are, like, say, sharing with me how you see it, I'm going within myself, right? And I'm feeling, does this feel like this to me as well, or does it feel differently? And this is how we can sort of approximate, the way to ourselves in relationship with others. So it isn't always that because we have the experience of, say, messy relationships, that this means that we are messy internally. It just may mean that we have a lot of blind spots, that there are things that we're not seeing. And psychology supports that, because 95, 98% of everything that we perceive, is determined by our subconscious. Okay, and this is then where things such as self-discovery, self-healing, and going, really spending some time, actually allocating time in our lives to this self-discovery and self-healing journey, then leads to us developing less blind spots. And that then allows us to see truth better the way it is and to do something about it. So having messy relationships doesn't mean that you're messed up. It often means that you have blind spots, that you have things there that you're not seeing. And this has to do with your mindset on one hand, values and so forth, but also with your conditioning. So sometimes we cannot see things because of the way they were modeled to us, because our internal system basically takes it as normal. And we cannot see things such as what's unhealthy, what's dysfunctional, or sometimes even all the way to not actually recognizing abuse. This is a big topic right now.
Yes. Yeah. And the not recognizing abuse, it's so, you know, those little things that actually when you and I have talked or talked to other people, and it's like, that's actually abuse. Do you understand what's happening? Like that's really painful. But because maybe they're not put in the hospital, they don't feel like it's abuse, right? Like, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like just varying degrees of that. So let's share, what is an empath, Jona? From your perspective, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the difference between energetic sensitivity and empathism, if you will, or and I'm trying to avoid a word here, and that is being empathetic, because that is different. Again, there's three different things. So we know that the number of people who are energetically sensitive, basically waking up to their seventh sense, if you will, is skyrocketing. So right now we're talking about a part of the population, anywhere from 18 to 25% of people, and especially the younger generations, who are wakening up to their inner ability to feel energies, to feel things that are not just five sensory. Okay, that is just a general classification. Now, many of us discover that we're energetically sensitive through our hypersensitivities. Okay, so like for instance, all this food sensitivities or sensitivity towards noise. You know, so a lot of the children, for instance, you know, that are diagnosed with ADD or sensory integration problems, you know, end up really being diagnosed with, you know, a different way of signal processing, a different way of wiring. And therefore, you know, if you want to take any kind of judgment out, those then qualify for being energetically sensitive. They're picking up on other things as well, and they're processing the things that they're picking up differently than others. Personally, as an energy healer, as an energy worker, I see this as a collective evolutionary step. So I think this is where we're all heading. These things aren't new. We know that we have the ability to pick up on subtle energies, to pick up on, you know, ESP, okay? What we haven't realized yet is that this is part of all our skill set. It just needs to be trained. And so this awakening is almost like a forced, you know, like you developing food sensitivities that basically tell you what's good for you and what isn't, okay? Or you develop sensitivities towards certain places or certain sounds, or, you know, those are all things that from a self-healing perspective would count as inner promptings, you know. It probably means that it's not good for you, right? Yes. And as a personal trainer, and with all the experience that you have, Marji, it's the same with movements or activities. Yes. Even exercises, you know. Yes, there's of course a general consensus that a certain type of exercise is good for this, and this is good for this, but we are all different. Yeah. Each and every body is different. Each and every ways of processing how we perceive the world and ourselves is different. Okay, so all we can really say is that, okay, we have people that are within the spectrum of like sort of what is considered to be normal perception, and then we have this group of people who are more sensitive to energies, and this can be different. You know, some people can see auras, some people can see energies, some people can see astral things. Some people just, you know, have a really strong instinct about foods, about certain physical things, about certain places. They pick up on things that are not sort of in this sort of evidence-based realm, okay? So just because you can see energies and somebody else can see things that have to do with like places or whatever, doesn't mean that you're more and they are less energetically sensitive. Because it's such a broad spectrum of signal processing that we have, you know, this can be different for each and every one of us. So being energetically sensitive doesn't really say anything. All it says is that the wiring you have and the way you perceive the world is slightly different. From an energy work point of perspective, and also from a neurological, so from a neuroscience perspective nowadays, is that yes, there is a different wiring that is actually provable. And yes, there is a different way of processing everything sort of that comes in. Okay, but there still is a piece missing here. And that piece has to do with how we then use this for making decisions, say. Okay, so someone who's energetically sensitive can feel, and this is often the case, very overwhelmed by being with other people, by being in public places, by dealing with technology, dealing with, I mean, there's a lot of examples of how, as an energetically sensitive, we can feel almost incapable or impaired by this energetic sensitivity if we cannot contextualize this right. So there's a lot of people there that have issues at their workplace. They're very sensitive to, say, contaminants in the air, fluorescent lights, things like this. All right. Now you can say, oh, this guy is just sort of hypersensitive, but you can also see this as a person who is energetically sensitive and picks better up on things that are not actually good for them. But because our system is still based on sort of this 5 sensory perception only, it's really difficult for us to prove these things. So we're often sort of shoved in a corner and tend to isolate ourselves, tend to feel unacknowledged, unvalidated in the way we see or perceive the world, or our workplace or our relationship, and feel very much alone with these problems. So energetically sensitive people tend to have issues with places where there's a lot of energies. Okay.
Yeah. And do you find that that oftentimes if they're in a situation like that, say maybe their workplace, or they're trying to push through that they are physically exhausted after?
Absolutely.
And really, and actually, like, from what I've seen, like almost like a dehydrated look and just exhausted, like really challenging to even like make it to bed type of thing, because they're just so overwhelmed, and then they think something's wrong with them, right?
I think you nailed it. It's this constant drainage and this constant sort of fatigue that people have that are energetically sensitive if they don't know how to interpret this right and how to work with this right. And there's a specific set of needs that comes in when we can identify about ourselves that we are energetically sensitive. We have a need for more space, not necessarily physical space, but space. We have an increased need for connection, for true connection. We have increased need for tidiness. It sounds a bit weird, but clutter and all that can overwhelm an energetically sensitive person. And there's many, many more examples of specific sets of needs that an energetically sensitive person has. I have a list of like 35 things, that we can add to the video here, that clearly defines, that when you have a lot of the problems that we've mentioned earlier, then this is not because there's something wrong with you. This is because you're energetically sensitive. And that's why we do these kind of videos, right? To tell people that this is something that you can work with. This is actually something that shows that, your system is working towards a more advanced, sort of an upgraded way of being human, okay? By, becoming able to read energies outside of your 5 senses, you become able to tap into a more fine-tuned navigation through your life, where you, not just your intuition, but really your sensory perception tells you this is not a good place, this is not a good job for me, this is not a good relationship for me, this is not, do you know what I mean? Like,
you start listening to those, and when you start trusting yourself in that, and then you can navigate so much smoother through life, that you're not exhausted, you're not feeling drained all the time, you're not doing other things to cope, to try to just get up in the morning, right? Because you're thinking that there's got to be medically something wrong with me, or that like this is just how life is, and it's not.
Right, because other people roll their eyes and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's just Marji," because she always finds something to criticize, or there's always something, right, that isn't right with her, and and then we feel sort of shoved into this corner of being hypersensitive or bitchy or critical, right? With the right education about these kind of needs that you have, and also learning what you can do about them, then it's just like any other, sort of personality trait. You're just accepting that, that you need to, that a party with, loud music, that after like an hour or so, it's really going to drain your energy, and you're going to have to pay for it the next day. So that helps you then to make better choices for yourself.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes, it does. Well, I mean, you know this about me. Like, if I know I'm going to be in an environment where it's extra stress or different things, like situations we talked about today, where someone passes and there's funerals and you're helping people, I know that, okay, I'm going to be giving a lot of myself. So I'm going to take some time and space after and before, and even during, maybe to go for a quick 15-minute walk so that I can be my best self for not only me, but for those around me, right? It's managing ourselves.
exactly. We begin to see that, those things, okay, there's obvious needs that we have that have to do with, food, shelter, exercise, hydration, nutrients, and all this. Most of you guys have already sort of educated yourselves on this. But when it comes to your energies, you also have needs. Okay, so regular self-clearing, like you said, Marji, and this can be in the form of taking a walk in nature, or taking a bath, or doing a little bit of breathing exercises, or yoga, or punching a bag. That's one of my favorites.
I like that one. I was like, yeah, I like that one.
Those things, then you learn to integrate those into your practical life. This is not some spiritual technique to be super spiritual. This is like self-clearing. So if you want to have a good evening with me, let me go and punch a bag for 15 minutes. Okay, then I'm better. Just kidding.
It's like, I view it as like the ritual of me getting up in the morning and brushing my teeth. It's like, now it's just part of my life, right? It's just part of me being here on earth. Yeah.
And this has come through us accepting that we're energetically sensitive. Okay, we have more need for that. Okay, there are certain things like, for instance, like the way I have my house. I used to be I'm this like sort of creative, messy person. I always know where everything is. In fact, I'm a really good finder of things. But if you just let me, I'm like kind of messy actually. But I've learned that this is really draining my energy. Okay. So about 30 years ago, I realized that if I keep my environment, my direct environment tidy, and tidy, when I say tidy, I don't talk about like super squeaky clean or anything, but tidy, and not, and don't allow dirt to accumulate, not allow clutter to accumulate, that this keeps me in a more balanced place throughout my day. All right. These are tiny little things that we can learn from being energetically sensitive, because at the end of the day, this is the same for everybody. Everybody feels better in a place that is not cluttered, but someone who's not energetically sensitive won't really be drained by it. You'll sort of, maybe in the background, all the way in the background, you'll feel that this is not as comfortable maybe as somebody else's place, but it will not affect you as much. So energetically sensitives don't have any special skills really. They have skills that we all have, but they are more tuned in. They're more switched on. Okay. And sometimes it feels like it's a bit of a curse, because there are things that you would like to do, but you end up not doing, because it's like, I don't know, because then I'm gonna have to deal with this. Like you said, there's things that are always, life happens, and my priorities would be to be able to be there for my family, for my friends, for my loved ones, and people who work with me. That's more important to me. I prioritize these things now, as opposed to, doing things that, I like them too, but, they are not actually sort of negatively impacting my energy balance. And so, I do them too from time to time, but I don't prioritize those things that affect me negatively energetically. So it has changed me as a person a bit, and my habits. Even my exercise habits. I used to be like extreme sports, marathon runner, blah, blah. And I had a lot of injuries and I did a lot of damage to my body that way, and this doesn't mean today that I'm not doing any of these things anymore, but I do it in a more conscious way. I do it in a different way.
Like myself included in that. Like in the past, it would have been.
Food's also a good example.
Yeah, like in the past, it was me kind of running from myself, right? Sometimes, right?
Yes.
And a form of like trying to like make myself stronger. Whereas now it's just a smoother, like, yeah, I'll go for a walk outside, or I'll get to go do. It doesn't mean I don't punch the bag every once in a while, but I enjoy that. It feels good. I'm not doing it for the same reasons I did before.
You listen more to what you truly need, as opposed to thinking you have to do this exercise because you don't want to have a belly, or because, for all these other reasons that you just mentioned. You do this more from a place of self-love and self-care, and where what it is that you want to engage in is supposed to up your energy, to increase your connection with yourself, and not make you feel you're fat, or make you feel that you're not able to perform in a certain way. So it takes all that out. So energetic sensitivity can help us to navigate through our lives. It makes does not indicate how well you're able to process emotions or relationships. That is then the category of the empath. So every empath is also an energetically sensitive person, but not every energetically sensitive is an empath. So I can't put a number to this. I would just have to grab it out of the air, but I'd say that out of the group of energetically sensitives in our total population, these 18 to 25%, right, of the total population, roughly 5% are empaths. So this isn't as big of a number as you think it is, and yet, though, when it comes to the actual numbers, that's still quite a lot. 5% being empaths. Now, what are empaths? Empaths are people who have, again, a skill that we all have, which is empathy. So being empathetic is something that everybody can be. All right, everybody, every person is empathetic per nature. This is part of our human design, part of this connectivity that we have in us, right? That we can feel, we can learn. I mean, empathy is something that is actually anchored in our physiology, in our nervous system. We even have something like mirror neurons, where we can, just by watching somebody else or just by talking to somebody else, learn something or pick up from that person, even without words. Okay, so where our nervous system begins to mirror that of the other person, this is really, really interesting. When the science that is being done right now, and all the studies that show actually all these things that we have observed for so many decades already, but couldn't explain, and now starting to get explained. It's really cool.
It's very cool. It's so cool.
But that's just the general human skill of being empathetic. What is an empath now? An empath is an energetically sensitive, sort of hyper empathetic person. Okay, that is someone who has, besides the ability of picking up energies in whatever form, also brings in the ability to pick up emotions. Okay, to pick up emotions of yourself as well as other people. And again, this comes with a specific set of needs, and also new skills, but also new needs. All right, so it requires you to navigate through your life and through your relationships a little differently, because when you pick up on emotions, let's say, between you and I, Marji, when you're good friends, that's something you really want to, I mean, you go into this place with your friend, and like what you shared earlier, the other person goes through a crisis or whatever, and you want to be present, and you really feel, sort of what the other person is feeling. That is called empathy. Okay, for an empath though, that label empath means that this person will not just be able to imagine what this feels like. The empath will actually feel it in their own body, their own physiology, their own neurology, okay? Everything, including physical pain, will respond as if this is something that you're experiencing right now. So it's like a one-to-one mirroring of the emotional energy of the other person. Okay.
Yeah, and the physical stuff is for me, because I'm such a physical person, very strong, right? You know, it's like you can feel the heaviness of the heart or the nausea in the stomach and just all the emotions that go along with that, depending on what the situation is. Yeah.
So you can imagine now that this comes with a different set of problems, right? And this is then actually one of the best ways, at least in this day and age, to identify yourself as an empath is by the problems that come with it. Namely, you know, the difficulties discerning, you know, whether the things that you're feeling are actually yours or not. So when the empath, again, who is energetically sensitive, is untrained, okay, so when an energetically sensitive person is untrained, they just feel overwhelmed and drained, okay, and then they just have to, they need more time to recharge. They need more time for self-care and self-nurturing. And when an empath is untrained, this can lead to much more severe problems. And namely, first of all, if you are walking through your life never really knowing if what you're feeling is actually yours or somebody else's, you can imagine there is this weird inner confusion as to what should I respond to. And for most, this leads to a confusion in regards to the own needs. Okay, so I'm picking up on what you're feeling. I'm picking up on what you're needing. You know, I'm actually, and this is why there's so many codependent people amongst empaths. I'm now suggesting you know, what you should do, because in me, I can feel that this is what you need, right? But what about my needs? Okay, so the confusion then ends up in behavior patterns, you know, where we tend to focus on other people's needs, on other people's emotions. And oftentimes, and this is, you know, one of the things that severely display in relationships, we end up not really knowing anymore what we are feeling, what we are truly feeling. And empathy, you know, as a result of this energetic sensitivity with the ability to pick up on emotions, needs to be trained. You need to develop a new roadmap. You need to learn some of these basic skills that we've talked about, like centering, grounding, self-clearing. That's like your daily bread and butter, really. But that's not where it stops, because you really need an extra second not to just recharge and go into self-care and self-nurturing. You need to learn how to reconnect with your own feelings, with your own needs. And this is not because you have been so whatever oblivious or self-destructive. In many cases, this has been because you've never actually learned the skill to differentiate yours from others. And this isn't just in conjunction with the people that we live with or that we love. This is with the collective.
Yeah, it is. And that discernment coming in is like, I mean, that took me a little bit, you know, and still I check it. Okay, is that what I'm feeling, or is that somebody else's? Okay, got it, right? But that was practice for me, and that and it still continues. It's
a journey for an empath. So what are some of the powers that come with that? And here's where we see connections to some of the experiences and our relationships, okay? So what does this generally lead an empath to do, this skill? Okay, so one of the really, really cool things about this is that you become an extraordinary good listener. Okay, I mean, you are the type of person that others gravitate to, is to share things with you, you know, you usually the person in your group or in your family or whatever, where people share, where they feel safe with their emotions because you can relate. Okay, Now, in relationships, in like direct romantic relationships, this may take a different nature, though, because you are constantly feeling everything, this sort of entangled your own emotions and your partner's emotions. And of course, you love your partner. So you tend to focus more on the other person's emotions. You also typically the one that is able to process emotions a little better, which means that, you will try to anticipate or try to work towards the emotions of the others. Okay, in the sense of like, hey, honey, are you okay? You're not really feeling okay. Is there anything you need? Do you need anything? And then sort of we develop this habit of constantly focusing on the needs of the other. And this then can create very unhealthy and often also abusive patterns. Just some keywords here. The typical empath narcissist trauma, that so many people experience nowadays. It's not that it's a new phenomenon, but it's something that people are now starting to become aware of. And so as you begin to label this, then of course you find a lot more people who see this as well. We do have, though, as a society right now, an increase in narcissism. Okay, so that does create a little more of that to be openly displayed. A lot of the narcissism in the past was kind of was coverted, was kept in family secrets, and sort of not really, it was, you didn't speak up. And some of that had to do with religious things, of course, and some of it had to do with family structures, power structures. And so as these old power structures are falling apart now, people are starting to come forward with this more, like where they felt that they were, say, manipulated or abused even in their relationships or in, growing up by narcissistic parenting. Now, it is a bit of a fad, so we got to be careful, but this is with everything that comes forward here into our society as a new sort of scope, as a new awareness, okay, always has the tendency to swing a little too far out, into the other direction. And so right now, it seems like the whole world is divided into, just victim and perpetrators, just like narcissists and their victims, empaths, sort of being sort of this preferred narcissistic supply, as that's called in that lingo. But when you look a little deeper, and this is actually the whole purpose of speaking about energetic sensitivity and being an empath, is you see something very, very interesting here. And that is, regardless of the psychological classification and all that, and of course, calling somebody a narcissist is never fair, just like how it's not fair to call somebody any name, okay, any label, but you can say, okay, you're displaying narcissistic behaviors or egotistical behavior. So this is usually what we want to say. We want to say that somebody's displaying really sort of off the charts selfishness, right? And the empath has this sort of notion that that this is something bad. So to be selfish. So the opposite end of the scale. So when you look at them energetically, I found out something very interesting, and that is that they're both in the same bracket. Those are both energetically sensitives, the empath as well as the narcissist. Okay, and one uses it to focus on the feelings of the other, and to like sort of feed into this, and the other uses this to take out of it. Okay, and they're literally like two opposite poles, magnets coming together, finding another in a perfect union. Okay, with the only problem that the empath usually ends up being victimized in some ways, and the narcissist discards, walks on, and replaces. Yeah. Okay, so this is then where the bad rap comes from, because then of course we feel completely crushed, discarded, and dumped and sucked dry. And one of the things where you can tell, that there is some kind of toxic relationship going on between two people is when one person gradually and continually starts feeling better about themselves, and they start looking better, and they start really building, and the other gradually declines, all the way to like actual physical symptoms. A lot of people end up with chronic pain and chronic health, physical conditions due to abusive relationships or toxic relationships. And here now, putting all this together that we talked about, right? Why are people energetically sensitive? To have a more sort of refined way of navigating through life. Why are people empaths? Okay, to be able to relate to other people, to connect to other people in a deeper sense, in a deeper way. Okay, and you put all this together. Yes, there's going to be some abuse on the way. But what this really, if you look at it as a collective advancement, right? What this means is that we are, as a species, developing into this direction that we can begin to connect on a deeper level. And for that, all this healing of the abuse, the healing of the abuse of powers and power structures in the past has to occur. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing all this trauma coming forward, all this education about trauma, this education about empath narcissists, or toxic relationships altogether, codependency, addictive structure in families, and so forth. All this has to happen collectively now, okay? And so you see, sort of these deeper issues that have been hidden or were denied in the past, now coming forward because you have more people who actually have the skills to pinpoint these things. We may not have the training yet. So if an empath has this training, you're not going to fall for a narcissist. You just won't, because you can spot them from 5 million miles away. Okay? You've just never been told how to do this. But this is your skill. This is your power as an empath. Okay? So yes, there is a victimization. Yes, there is a trauma. And you know this, Marji. I do a lot of that education work and healing work here at Transcult, especially in regards to empaths and narcissists. But you also have to understand that underneath the narcissism is also an energetically sensitive person who was traumatized. Okay, not to minimize, not to justify, but I want you to see that these are two of the same kind of people who have had maybe slightly different conditions growing up. Okay, and here I am, of course I look like the good guy because I'm the empath, right? And I can read how you feel, and I can anticipate this, and I can sort of, already make the foot bath for you before you even know that you need a foot bath, right? Or, I can give you things that make you what? Love me more? Yeah. That's also manipulation.
Yeah.
It's also an emotional manipulation. It's just in a softer and more self-sacrificial way, and therefore, not regarded as anything, toxic. But if you look at the energies underneath this is something that we can clearly see. It's just as toxic. Okay, so to go into this codependent place with your loved one and to disregard your own needs, and to focus on the other person, on this validation, on this love from, somebody else, you are objectifying the other person as well. This is maybe a little difficult, like a stretch a bit for you guys, to see this, how I can equate this. So I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's the same energetic process. We just tend, of course, to see the victim in the empath.
Yeah, or that it's okay to sacrifice ourselves for someone else.
Yes.
Like society has created that, so that makes it more acceptable.
Yes.
Right. And when it's not okay at all, actually. But it is what it is. There's no judgment in that. But you're getting your power back when you start recognizing those.
That's the thing. Yes, and then you just end up, having all the different shades and colors of people. They're always going to be narcissists. They're always going to be, codependents. They're also always going to be people who isolate. Always going to be people who are very social. This is just part of the whole variety that we have as humans. But with these skill sets that we have, we can't just go into this sort of black and white with everything and say, every empath is a good person and every narcissist is a bad person. That is not very sophisticated. That is just as dualistic, as saying all people with unibrows are psychopaths.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That just popped up. But you know what I mean, right?
I was picturing you with a unibrow, Jona. I couldn't help it.
So you can see this is very complex. So you start out, at recognizing that you're energetically sensitive, and often you find out that the people in your life tend to be energetically sensitive as well. If you're surrounded by people who are not energetically sensitive, and this is something that has happened to you and I, Marji, and a lot of the empaths growing up, like 40, 50 years ago, is that we kind of got traumatized or punished for that, and we shut this down. Okay, so there's something specific about the first couple of generations, of empaths that needs to be healed. But typically when you have, like, you grow up and you're 20-year-old today, you will intuitively have people around you that are energetically sensitive as well. They won't necessarily all be empaths, but they will be energetically sensitive. We do this, we look for like-minded people. And this is, in the end, why Marji, why you and I are doing these things. Yes. This is our, this is our daily, it is our profession, right? To deal with people who are like us, basically. But, you probably won't run into this, but, all you really got to learn is that these are things that allow you to move into a different level of consciousness, living your life. Okay. And so things such as, no, I'm not going to do this. This doesn't feel right to me. Or, I don't know, the energy in this place, sort of doesn't match up or whatever. Those things will become normal now, to say these. Now, when we grew up, this was like a total no-no to say.
Or if I didn't want to sit in a certain chair, right? Because I
wanted
to sit in a spot, it would be like,
yeah, get over it, suck it up, right? Or something like that. No, this is becoming more and more acceptable. So energetic sensitivity is not something that we have to hide anymore, which is good. But we still have to learn how to deal with empathy. Okay, so empathy, or being an empath.
So, Jona, I would like you to share a little bit about some of the things that you offer at Transcodes that have helped me be able to, like, work on my own self-healing and navigate through all of this fun stuff on Earth much better. Let's share a little bit about that.
All right, so transcodes, I know this is a weirder word because it doesn't really sound like it has anything to do with energy healing, but I guess intuitively I picked this word to show something important. For me, energies were very much like codes. They were like something that I can read out in a person. And yes, some of it is mystical and some of it is waterfalls and unicorns, but that's just a really tiny little part of that. I'm also a chemist and I'm also a computer scientist. And so in my translation of energies, I could clearly see the patterns and I could clearly see how each and every one of us carries this energy signature, and how, sometimes there are faulty programs, and sometimes there are implants, and sometimes there are attachments, and sometimes there are conditionings, and sometimes there is karmic stuff there. And you can take them out and you can replace them, you can reprogram them, you can rewire them, and you can heal a person by literally, and this is of course not a very popular way of talking about energy work, but literally, sort of helping a person to understand their own composition and teach them the skills, how to reinvent themselves, how to rewire and recompose themselves. And so that's why I call transcodes. Okay, it's a hint at transcoding, transceiving, transmuting, and so forth. This whole sort of metamorphosis of things. It's a platform for energy work, for all kinds of energy work, and for teaching energy work too. We teach energy work to individuals, to children, to professionals. We have, courses that allow you to do this in the sort of like linear old way of learning, and lessons and workbook and daily exercises. We have individual work, of course, where it's therapy-like, it's like counseling, okay, where we read your energy and then we work with you on developing a roadmap and what it is that you can do, and bit by bit, energy coaching, as we call this, change things, in conjunction with working through this with you. Then we have actual energy work tech or modalities. We call them transmissions. Those are energy sessions where a person can join in individually or as groups. So in our public calendar, like a gym, right? Yeah. We have all these classes that go on. It's not classes, it's these transmissions, and you can join in if you want to, or you can book your private class. But these are theme-based. They target a specific problem. Say we want to work on inner child issues, or we want to work on shadow. We want to work on, like 2 days ago, we had a workshop that was not a transmission, but we had a workshop about this empath narcissist trauma and how this shows, the energetic aspects of that. We have self-mastery classes, mostly for people who are in the healing professions, where we break a condition down to its energetic components and then show the medical, the psychological, and help people to bring this back together, to develop their own self-healing strategy. And then we have these transmissions where we actually go into this deeper meditative state with the person. This is done remotely. I know this is difficult to imagine, but we can read out your energy, remotely. I don't need to see a person. I don't need to talk to them. As soon as a person agrees to coming into the session, I can read out their energy and I can comment back. I translate what I read out to the person and give this feedback. And this is then sort of the self-healing work through, me as a facilitator to translate that for you so that you can then, take your power back and, tune into yourself and activate the self-healing in you. So this is what we do. It's very broad.
I would like to add in, just for everyone, the community and the forum that is at Transcodes is very, I have been a part of other groups, and I've been with Transcodes since the beginning. The way the forum works in the community is a very safe, incredible environment for you to share in a way that it's totally protected, and it never has ever felt icky or uncomfortable, not once. And that is, Jona, we've been a part of some things, and to have such a large forum where we can share and see what other people are experiencing as we're going through transmissions, or as coaches, when you're looking at that, oh wow, all of these people are feeling the same thing, just in a little bit different way, how it's affecting them. But that they get to communicate through this and get feedback in a very safe environment. And I have to give you kudos for keeping that forum and everyone. It's just so clean. It's
yeah, that's always been my main concern. This is you have to, this is the same when you're a yoga teacher or a personal trainer for that matter. You have to make sure that the space that you are offering and that you're facilitating things and are safe for the people, especially when it comes to like really deep and intimate things. Okay, so this is where we basically apply our skills, our training. We can energetically protect those places, okay? Not just the session itself, but also the forum and stuff. So this is something that we've always prioritized. And the reason for that is that we understand the healing power in that. So for us, this is a very sacred thing. To create a forum, for people who are learning all these deep inner things, is a sacred thing for us. Okay, not to make it special or to make this in any way sort of, we don't know the people. Most people are, you know, we just know them through their email address, you know. So, you know, like I'd say like maybe 5% of all the people that are in this community, they work with us directly. We leave everybody this complete freedom, you know, to stay anonymous, to just be an avatar, if you will, you know, and still, you know, respond to their requests and energies in the same way as with someone who works with us directly, you know, because this is something that we as I think as human beings, you know, really have to get modeled. We have to get modeled what integrity means, okay, what working things out together means, what energy exchange, proper energy exchange, what this means. Okay, we need these places where we can actually experience this. Otherwise it's just sort of a nice idea, you know. But if you end up, like you've said, you know, joining you know, groups or things, I get it why people don't want to be in groups, because many of us have made negative experiences, so have I. Okay, but this has only motivated me, you know, to really go for it and to create a space where that is possible, you know, where we can utilize the power, the synergy power of people healing together, you know, of sharing their healing path.
Such an amazing, beautiful job, and the space is really, that was really important for me to share, because you don't see that often, especially now with all the social media stuff and all of these groups.
It waters it down a bit. I agree. Yeah.
And also, just FYI, sometimes if you've done something and you're feeling something and you're not really sure where it is, I have been known to go on the forum in the middle of the night and being like, what is that? And see if anybody else is feeling it. And they are, so I'm not alone. So, you know, not as
and that's really how this all started. Yeah, thanks for saying this, man. This is how it all started, because one of the biggest things for us in the beginning was to let people know you're not alone, that you're not crazy. You know, this is not because, you know, you were sick or nuts or whatever. This is real. Okay. Now, the way you interpret it or the way you translate it may be skewed, you know, because you have fears, or because, you know, you've had to weed yourself through so many things that you see things in a more sort of black or whitish way. And this is like with everything in life, you know, as you mature, you see that there's a lot more gray areas, that there's a lot more shades of everything. Everything is kind of like a sliding scale. But just because you're experiencing this doesn't mean this, you know. All it means is that, oh, okay, maybe. And when it comes to energy work, you know this too, Marji. You know, it's very complex. It can get complex. So you come to me with, you know, chronic physical pain, and you know, and I'm looking at you as a whole, and of course I see a multitude of things that are contributing. You know, I see certain, you know, physical aspects and habits, certain emotional conditions, you know, and upbringing, and I look at, you know, sort of your mindset. You know, what is your belief system? You know, what is your what are you dealing with in that sort of critical inner voice, that inner pessimist in you, right? What is that telling you? What does your relationship look like? And what's your spiritual alignment? When you put all this together, makes it sort of really big, but when you put it all together, it really comes down to just allowing a person to be whole, and to see that, you know, yes, there will always be things that need a bit more loving, you know, that need a bit more integration, you know, and maybe some areas where we need to educate ourselves a little to understand better. Okay, so the mind has a function in all of this, because it can actually motivate us. I don't know about you, Marji, but, you know, everything that I've done like 30 years ago that had to do, you know, public lectures on nutrition and wellness, you know, from sort of a biochemical metabolic point of view, you know, I wouldn't have felt motivated to do this without the knowledge that I had. So the knowledge always motivated me to go out and share, and, you know, include other people in that.
Yeah, and the experience. Well, that's definitely, you know, that about me.
Right.
You know,
And
yeah, right.
the experience is then what gets you into this place of credibility. You know, this is what we see so much here with these growing generations of empaths. You know, this is why we have this growing number of people who want to become healers or feel this calling for healers. Those are all empaths. Some of them a bit more trained than others, you know, some of them not trained at all, and often, you know, burned in that way as well, you know, because when you don't train this, you end up absorbing everything. That's the problem for the empath. So, you know, just because an empath, just because you can see energies, does not mean that, you know, you're already done, you know, that it qualifies you for being a healer. No. You know, that just because you can hear music and just because you can enjoy music doesn't mean that you have the qualification to become a musician. Okay, so you have to learn the skill set, you know, and that
well,
then
it's also for your own protection and the other person's. And I
absolutely,
it actually, like you and I know that, like it's to keep that healthy boundary and also not taking anything on.
yes.
So I know we're going to do this again, right, Jona?
Yes, that's awesome, Marji. I love those kind of conversations. And we should probably ask for people, we should probably ask for people to, be able to send in perhaps questions, or maybe we should do polls for what kind of subjects we may want to address.
Yeah, please, in the comments, please, on either Transcodes or Basmati, write comments and any suggestions that you would want us to, topics that you'd like us to cover, or questions you may have. And you can reach Jona at Jona, Jona, at transcodes.com. And you can find her stuff on here. You'll see there'll be a link to her. So
very cool.
Thank you, Jona.
Thank you for the invitation, Marji.
All right, much love, honey. Bye.
Bye.